All right, Earth Explorers. Looks like we're going to go live just a little bit early, and then we'll bring in the studio here in about 2 minutes. So just to give you a chance to begin populating. This is America Free Radio. We're coming to you live tonight through the Revolution Radio Network on freedomslips.com, Studio A. Coming to you live to the America Free Radio studios somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. Tonight we have a special guest. He's going to be coming on in about half an hour. Tracey Ash is going to be joining us from the UK. And we're going to be talking about the false matrix and what is going on in the ascension gateways around the planet. Should be a pretty interesting program tonight. We'll bring in the studio with the rest of the Revolution Radio freedomslips.com audience in about a minute and a half. We'll just wait for the commercials and that to play on there. For now, it's just you and me. So let me talk a little bit about what's happening this weekend. Saturday is my webinar, which is the Success Mentoring webinar. It begins at noon Eastern time. If you haven't signed up for that, you can do that by going to brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com. Click on the webinar link on the left-hand side, and the date is right there. All you have to do is pick a day, sign up. It'd be great if you came in this Saturday and joined us, because there's plenty of room. It's going to be 90 minutes plus a half hour of journal training, how to fill out a journal, and then we'll make a date for the part 2. Shortly thereafter, I'll send out the Zoom links on Thursday, and then I will send them again Saturday morning for you all. And it'll be a really good time, I promise. Okay, let's see if we can go ahead and add the studio. Oh, also this Saturday, I'm flying out to Boulder, Colorado. We're filming another episode of Beyond Belief TV with George Norrie. That'll be airing in the next month or so. And then don't forget, at the end of March, the beginning of April, is the Human Origins Conference. You can get to that by either following me on Facebook or Twitter, or any of the other social media sites, or you can go to my website, brooksagnew.com, and click on upcoming events. It's right there. You can register, and I will see you in Albuquerque. All right, so here we go. We're live. Okay, we're live in Studio A, and we have the entire Freedom Slips audience on. Oh.
Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
All right, so good to have you all. Here we go.
All right, thanks for listening while we take that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Here comes the prelude music. Hang on. my goodness, what a week. Lots of traveling this week. Went up to New York, did a conference with Dr. UFO in New Jersey, Hamilton, New Jersey. It was really good. 65 people showed up. We filled the place out, and everyone was great. Sorry you missed it. If you weren't following me on Facebook or Twitter or one of the other social medias, or you weren't listening to this program, you missed it. But that's okay. The Human Origins Conference is coming up the first weekend in April. So all you have to do is go to my website, brooksagnew.com, brooksagnew.com. I will put the link down in the description below of this YouTube, so you can click on it directly, and you can sign up for the Human Origins Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico. If you're anywhere close to that, you have to get out there. Brad Olson's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Laura Eisenhower. Russell is going to be there. A bunch of other exciting people, and it is always going to be a good program out there. The following weekend, if you're anywhere in Sedona, Arizona, you can come out there and see us the following weekend with Andrew Collins, Brad Olson, myself, Laura Eisenhower, Suzanne Ross. It's going to be a great program out there as well. They're going to be doing tours of the sacred rocks around there in Sedona. If you're close to either of those venues, you need to make your way out there, either the first weekend in April or Easter weekend in Sedona, and I'll be happy to see you there. All right, let's get down to it. The fast radio bursts, we've been watching those off and on for a couple of years. Last year we had some repeat events. That is pretty rare. You might have to excuse me a little bit. I'm kind of nursing a cough tonight. Too much traveling around, too many sick people all around the holiday weekend. Okay. Mysterious ultra-fast pinpricks of radio energy keep lighting up the night sky, and nobody knows why. A newly discovered example of this transient phenomenon has been traced to its place of origin. Believe it or not, it's a nearby spiral galaxy. But it's only made things murkier for astronomers. The problem concerns a class of blink and you'll miss them heavenly events known as these FRBs, or fast radio bursts. In a few thousandths of a second, these explosions produce as much energy as the sun does in nearly a century. So that's a lot of energy in a very close amount of time. Researchers have only known about these since 2007, when the big antennas started coming online. We don't really know how to explain them yet. It's quite possible there's a whole bunch of information crammed down in a very short amount of time, and we may have to spread these things out in order to see what's going on. Scientists were given some help in 2016 when they discovered that these fast radio bursts repeat themselves. The repeating FRB was eventually traced back to a dwarf galaxy with a high rate of star formation 3 billion light years away. The galaxy contains a persistent radio source, probably a nebula of some kind, that would explain the FRB's origin. Now, ostensibly, these travel at the speed of light, so they take these areas of space may have aged and passed away in the amount of time it took for the signal to get from there to here. But it does tell us something about what's going on out there. Follow-up observations by a network of telescopes in Europe allowed the research team to produce a high-resolution image of the FRB's location. And this image is really freaky looking. I actually have an image of it in my Remembering the Future presentation that you will see live at the Human Origins Conference. I think you'll really enjoy it. That location turned out to be a medium-sized spiral galaxy like our Milky Way that is surprisingly nearby, only 500 million light years away, making it the closest known FRB to date. And this is completely different than the host and local environments of other localized FRBs. And we're not really sure, what to make of it. But it is telling us a lot about our universe, and it's also backlighting a lot of other things that we want to know about the universe, like what is the nature of the fabric of space-time, and is space really empty, or is it full of gas laying along flux lines in the open spaces of the void out there? Researchers hope that subsequent data might help them get a handle on what this FRB is telling them. But and I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of grad students working on this. A lot of grant money is going to be thrown around, and we're going to get some information from it. I think it might be, quite enlightening as we find out. Somebody asked me the question over the weekend. I was talking about the beryllium ion modems, that I discussed in the Arc of Millions of Years series. I think it was Volume 1, Chapter 2. It's the first time I introduced them. They're based upon technology that's called entangled particle theory. Ostensibly, you take a large ion, you split it in two, and when you do, some of the particles in this ion are entangled with the particles in this ion. Well, you can reverse the spin in this one, and the other half, which was once related to that ion, the particle will immediately reverse spin as well. It's a balancing necessity called the Pauli exclusion principle. All the ions, all of the particles in an ion have to balance to zero. So if you have plus 1/2, then the other particle has to be minus 1/2, and they all have to even out to zero. And if you flip the spin of one particle, then another particle has to reverse its spin to match it in order to balance the mathematical equation. We don't know why it does this, but Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. We also know that most grad students that get through PChem or the PChem lab, eventually you're going to have to do this experiment, or you get an opportunity to do the experiment if you have the equipment at your university. So it is quite repeatable, quite reliable, but we don't know why it does it. We just know that it does it. And a couple of experiments have been done where these particles are separated by large distances, not just across the lab, but as much as 11 kilometers apart. 11 kilometers apart for two ions might as well be the other side of the universe. So the interesting thing about this is that I was talking with Dr. Jim Bell, who runs the rover programs on Mars, Opportunity and Spirit. You remember those little beggars? And I asked him, what's the hardest part about the program? And of course, the rovers had outlived their expected program. And so it was handed off to Caltech, and grad students were running programs to run the rovers through on Mars. And he said the hard part is that the student has to create the program here, beam it to Mars, which at its closest point is 53 million miles away. Marsus, which is an orbiting radio satellite that goes around Mars, picks up the broadcast from Earth, goes around to the rover side of the planet, beams the program down to the rover picks up the program, unpackages it, runs the program, collects the information, waits for Marsus to come back around, beams its results back up to the orbiting radio satellite. It gets around Earth's side, sends the beam back to Earth. 7 or 8 minutes later, it arrives at Earth. He said it's making grad students old before their time. And I said, well, why don't you just put a BIM? Why don't you just put a beryllium ion modem on the rovers, and then you can communicate with them real time through subspace? And the phone was kind of quiet then, and he said, well, I don't know what a beryllium ion modem is. And I said, well, Jim, they haven't been invented yet, but this is how they work. And I described the way the ion flips the spin. And I said, look, minus 1/2 and plus 1/2 is the same as 1 or 0, right? So you already have your binary state. All you have to do is flip the spin of the particle here back and forth at the baud rate. The sister particle in the modem on Mars will reverse its spin to balance the equation, and you can transfer the program real time. Now, the interesting thing about the beryllium ion modem is, yes, the two halves of the ion will communicate with one another, but also, once the modem is built, it becomes a good receiver for other particles that may have been created at the same time that particle was from another supernova, and you'll begin to receive information from other parts of the universe. And I think that's what these fast radio bursts are. However, as I told you, we have to wait 500 million years or 1 billion light years or 10 billion light years for that message to get here. But not so with the beryllium ion modem. You would receive those messages at the time that they were created, independent of the distance of space. Now that's pretty amazing stuff. So somewhere around the year 2030, 2034, 2032, somewhere in there, when the beryllium ion modem is invented, it will not only receive messages from the other half, but it will also receive messages from elsewhere in the galaxy. So these subspace receivers will begin to receive information from all over the galaxy, and that's when things are really going to change on this world. Of course, hopefully we figure out how to get along before that happens, because we're going to want to explore, we're going to want to talk, we're going to want to know about different energy devices, different propulsion systems for exploring star systems, and advanced civilizations will be able to provide those to us. So at 8:30, which is about 15 minutes from now, we're going to bring Tracey Ash on the program. She is a friend of mine. She's probably a friend of yours if you follow her on Facebook. She's very active. She goes to the Ascension gateways around the planet. She's very familiar with teaching people how to treat those, how to navigate those. But she's also a good teacher about how to overcome the false matrix. And we're going to talk about that. I'll give you a few definitions and terms and things like that that are out there. I'm sure you've heard the term false matrix from other sources, but obviously you're here at America Free Radio, X Squared Radio, and you're here with me. And so you're going to get the more scientific approach along with the esoteric approach in just a little bit. Don't forget that YouTube chat is going on over here, so I can look at that. Zaid's there, Terry's there, Piper's there. Hi, Terry. Good to see you all day. We've been going back and forth about the shortcomings of Facebook. Facebook blocked me from putting links on my news feed or in my messenger today, so I couldn't get any news out about any of the upcoming events or my books or my webinars because Facebook had everything. Had the blockade going, and I could not find the mouse hole to get through it. So we were kind of complaining about that, and Piper was helping me keep from committing suicide over it. I'm kidding. I'm just saying Facebook is such a pain in the butt sometimes because they think they own all the information that's on there. And Festus is out there too. Thank you guys so much for coming in. This is the first live broadcast of America Free Radio for the year 2020. We will be on all year long and try to do as much live as we possibly can. Next Sunday, I'll be traveling back from Boulder, Colorado, after having filmed another episode of Beyond Belief TV with George Norrie. And lots of great things coming to you this year, not only on the radio, but also live events. Be sure to stay tuned for all of those. I'll try to put the links in the description of this video so you can keep up with it. And let's talk a little bit about the recent discovery. I know we make all these recent discoveries that are really old, but about 790,000 years ago, that was about, well, it was a little while ago, a meteor actually slammed into Earth with such force that the explosion blanketed about 10% of the planet with shiny black lumps of rocky debris. The debris is known in geology as tektites. These are little glassy blobs of melted terrestrial rock that were strewn from Indochina to eastern Antarctica and from the Indian Ocean to the western Pacific. Now, for more than a century, scientists searched for evidence of the actual impact that created these little pitted blobs. We find them all over the place, even on the ocean floor. But the crater's location eluded detection until now. Geochemical analysis and local gravity readings told researchers that the crater lay in southern Laos. That's right, outside of Vietnam, on the Bolaven Plateau. The ancient impact was concealed under a field of cooled volcanic lava spanning about 2,000 square miles. When the meteor hits Earth, a terrestrial rock at the impact site can liquefy from the intense heat and then cool into these little glassy tektites, which blast out everywhere. And we see them on the ocean floor. They kind of make a layer on the ocean floor, and we have discovered them several times. But we did not know where the source was. It's not like looking at a meteor field that comes on the planet. Like here in North and South Carolina, there was a strike of a field of meteors that came through. And of course, when they landed with tremendous force, they dug out a whole bunch of lakes across of North and South Carolina. And underneath the lakes are the original flattened forests that were laid down when these meteors came through. Now, you could follow this meteor field all the way out into the Atlantic, all the way up into Siberia. But these rocks came from out there. What we're talking about here, these tektites are actually debris that are blown out of the surface of the Earth when an asteroid, or I mean a meteor, not an asteroid, when a meteor strikes the Earth. Now, let's see here. Oh, the force of the impact is thought to have created a rim that measures about 300 feet tall, according to the study. Tektites from the impact were at their biggest and most abundant in the eastern part of central Indochina. But because the tektites were so widespread, previous estimates of the crater's size ranged from 9 miles in diameter to 186 miles in diameter, which made it pretty hard to find. For the new study, the researchers... Oh, you noticed this? Yes, this is my Space Force hat. Yeah, I picked it up at Trump Tower over the weekend at the official Trump store. This is it's a really cool hat, Space Force. I'll show you really close. See? Yeah, that's the official stuff there. I like it. Got a lot of good compliments on this at Baggage Claim. Anyway, the new study first investigated several promising eroded crater candidates: southern China, northern Cambodia, northern Laos, but these were all ruled out. In all cases, the suspected crater-like features turned out to be much older and were instead identified as erosion in rocks dating back to 252 million years ago. But it turned out that the crater was kind of buried. It was buried in fields of volcanic lava, and most of the lava flows were in the right age range, 51,000 to 780,000 years old, and the study authors peered below the lava's surface, and there it was. By taking gravity readings at more than 400 locations, the resulting gravity map showed one area of particular interest with a gravitational anomaly, a subsurface zone, less dense than the volcanic rock surrounding it. Their measurements hinted at an elliptical, elongated crater about 300 feet thick, about 8 miles wide, and 11 miles long. And bingo, all these clues suggested that this thick pile of volcanic rock does indeed bury the site of the impact. Quite cool to be able to find stuff like this. I just think it's fascinating. Don't you? I just do. I would like to be on that, college team that went out and found that thing. It's the stuff PhDs are made. Oh, MacGyver, glad you're here. Got somebody named JK. Interesting. Can't believe trans response. Weak. I don't know what that means. Is my sound coming through okay? Is that the deal? I'm seeing good sound pressure on my meter. I just don't know if it's going out there to you guys. Yes. By the way, Zaid, have you signed up for my webinar this Saturday at noon Eastern Time? It'd be a good one to come to. You can see the Remembering the Future lecture. Well, it should take 90 minutes. Maybe online it'll be a little bit shorter than that. But then we're also going to go over journal building, a great skill to have if you're going to set goals for 2020. You should sign up. I will. I'll put the link right down here in the bottom in the description when this video is done. We will bring Tracey Ash on in about 7 minutes if you want to hang out. We won't break. We'll just add her on. This is hour-long segments on this. Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. Good feedback. The sound is fine. That's good to know. And who do we got out there? Cafe Cannon 19. Good evening from Arlington, Texas. Well, there we go. That's good. I worked down in Dallas from May to October of 2018. That was a nice stint working on the electric vehicles down there. I have enough time probably to cover this story. It kind of interested me because it was on the Aussie fires. Of course, Australia is now assessing the damage from the catastrophic wildfires that killed 24 people, destroyed millions of acres. I don't know how many animals, tons and tons of stuff. Of course, the climate change people jumped right on it because they saw a great fundraising opportunity here. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And they said, yes, it's true. Australia is on fire because of global warming, climate change, blah, blah, blah. And none of it turned out to be true. Turned out police in New South Wales said they have a total of 183 suspects, including 40 juveniles, that have faced some type of legal action for a variety of brush fire-related offenses since early November. 47 of them are accused of discarding a lighted cigarette or match on land, while 53 others are charged with failing to comply with the total fire ban. But 24 of them, including several Muslim youth, charged with intentionally setting the fires. Now you wonder what in the world is going through people's minds when they set an entire continent on fire. As of this week, 22 civilians and 3 firefighters have been killed. That's not good. These people are going to spend a long time in prison. Fires appear to slow down on Tuesday because Monday night on Quantum Connections, I was on with the host, Lucky, on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We had a guided meditation. Now, I got to tell you, there was no rain forecasted for 6 days. That was Monday. So we had a guided meditation on TFR, and we said we want a gentle soaking rain to come and either put those fires out or make it possible for the firefighters to put the fires out. And I said to Lucky on the air, there is no rain forecast for 6 days in any direction. If this happens, we're the ones that did it. And sure enough, on Tuesday, it rained. Now, I want to give a heartfelt thank you to the listeners of the Truth Frequency Radio Network, specifically the Quantum Connections radio program, because that much needed rain and cooler weather were reported in parts of the country, though temperatures are expected to rise again in a few days. Anyway, the deadly wildfires have destroyed more than 15 million acres of land. Of course, it will spring back as long as the floods don't come and strip the topsoil away. There's a total fire ban. People are going to face a year in prison if they don't obey it. But these 24 that were responsible for deliberately setting these fires, I would say, may God have mercy on your souls. A lot of kangaroos and koalas lost because of that. Let's see if we can bring Tracey on right now and see what we can do here. There she is. And let's see what happens. We'll see if she picks up. Calling Tracey Ash. And looks like she is in. Nope, still calling her. She should pick up. There we go. How are you tonight?
I'm great.
That is good.
How are you?
I'm great. Have you been listening to the program?
For Australia, because of course I miss going to Australia because of the fires.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Tracey and I know each other because she had a conference at Mount Shasta, which I went to, and was privileged to speak there. Pretty good experience there. But it was great meeting her because she's one of the great Ascension Gateway caretakers of the earth. She's constantly on the go. Lots of stuff in Japan, lots of stuff in Egypt, and other great continents around the world. And she had availability tonight because she's working late. So thought about bringing her on. And I want to talk about, in this half hour, about the origin of the false matrix. Now, a lot of people hear this term, but to be honest, Tracey, they don't know what the heck it means. So I've got a couple of definition terms here from what I've looked up, but I want to hear it from you because you're one of the great workers out there that are trying to help people overcome it. So help us understand, what is the false matrix?
I've been thinking about this quite a lot, actually, because I've taken a little time in retreat. I often do this to process my ideas and also to be able to translate those ideas around the ascension and the new earth and what it means to be in this simulation. And that is what the false matrix is. So it's a lower density simulation which has multiple frequency fences. We get locked into those frequency fences. We get enslaved. We get caught in attachments, often completely blind, unaware, or in repeat themes in terms of our healing agendas, or repeat attachments in terms of our stereotypes. And what it means is we stray so far away from what our original mission is here on the planet. So as small children, we often have dreams of a pathway in life that isn't connected with or immersed in the structures, the systems of the false matrix. So I'm coming into my 5th decade, and the false matrix has always fascinated me because I was always able to read it, detect it. And because the false matrix is engineered to maintain a follower density and follow a life force for individuals, it's often incredibly difficult to detect. So this is where the simulation or the machine really impacts what all of us could have more of, which are actually metaphysical gifts, greater intelligence beyond the system of education we're immersed in terms of our programming. So there are certain structures in society or certain machines that really shape us into the enslavement of the false matrix. So it's multifaceted in many ways, but it's certainly a machine, it's a simulation, and we become enmeshed, entangled, entrenched, and often it takes decades for us to untangle ourselves.
We're trained that way. I mean, when we come to this planet, we can't even wipe our own butts, and then we have to learn to talk and then walk and then all this stuff. And by the time we're put into the education system, we're already hooked up to the false matrix. We were already taught that the goal to life is to work hard, make a lot of money, fill our garages with toys and our 401ks with numbers, and grow old and die. That's the goal of life. And so many of my friends and so many people that I speak to every single day, they're caught in this false matrix and they don't even know they're in it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. It's not even about our conscious education. So being told that we're also in a metaphysical entanglement with it as well. So we absorb the programs that our parents have inherited and so forth. So there are many features to the way that we inherit it through conscious, unconscious, subconscious programming. What I've discovered in terms of my own work and constant research in terms of resetting false matrix programs, I very much look to detect and to read an individual's field so that their original sacred contracts of destiny can be analyzed, accessed, and unlocked once again. And what I've discovered is when we do that, even the most ardently programmed individual for a moment can absorb their innermost secrets being revealed. And
what happens if those innermost secrets, what happens if those innermost secrets are actually their deepest fears? How do you help them overcome that?
I believe that the innermost secrets are often the greatest dreams. And when we hold another individual in a greater capacity beyond fear, and when we move into a place that serves and can see beyond the false matrix, so our own consciousness must make those breakthroughs first, then we can transcend the usual frequency fences of fear. And what I've learned through working with thousands of individuals, I've probably done around 50,000 readings. I'm a trained metaphysician as well. I don't know if you know that, Brooke. I was trained at the College of Psychic Studies, and then I was mentored by Susanna McInnery, the president of the College of Psychic Studies during the 90s. And I was taken out of a training class, my apprenticeship, and I landed my first contract of work. And so it brought me into a career when the College of Psychic Studies was at its height, and I embarked upon a career where I persevered in terms of my own training and my own excellence. So whenever I did a session for anyone, or whenever I do a session for anyone, I work without questioning the client. All I need is a name. I can work on Skype. I don't have to see them. And then I progress and I do a 50, 60-minute session. And my mission and my main goal with all of my metaphysical work is that where we've been immensely well trained, then we can transcend the usual stereotypes that are associated with metaphysics, spirituality, the psychic arts, trance channeling, mediumship, etc.
Well, most people are not skilled in that. They can't figure out how to do that for themselves. Plus, what makes it difficult is there's a negative agenda that's put in the plan to control humanity and to prevent us from truly awakening. I mean, there's a big difference between woke and awake. Okay, let me just say that right off the bat. And it makes a lot of sense when you figure out who it is that's trying to control all the souls of humanity. And it also makes sense when we think about those who maybe haven't had the training, but they have the gift. They have this gift, this psychic gift. I had it since I can remember, since I was 9. However, I was trained as a chemist, not a metaphysician. So I'm trying to resolve these two abilities, the ability to work complex mathematics and the ability to see these energetic connections and disconnections. And I can see the wires, in a sense, going through the wall, but I can't see what's on the other side of the wall because the matrix blocks it. The matrix forces us to address this third dimension when our consciousness really wants to address the fifth dimension. So how do we do that?
I agree. I believe that part of the reason is that we need to be often initiated by an individual who has broken through the ceiling of fear, because fear, of course, is a massive frequency fence that we need to break through. In terms of ourselves, in terms of my own journey, I can speak about my own journey. I love initiation, and I also love breaking reality ceilings. So I came from the north of England, and I constantly challenged the reality that I inherited as a child. And I was tutored to study philosophy, politics, and economics at Oxford University. And so I have the third dimensional intelligence capabilities. I also, like you, had childhood experiences, quantum experiences, dimensional experiences, contact experiences that constantly pointed towards cosmos, consciousness, and a very definite early education through experience in quantum and the mechanics of consciousness as well. So I see the bridge between spirituality and science. I also see the bridge between creativity and consciousness and spirituality as well, because I was also a trained designer. So there are many aspects of our world that we can connect if we are not operating in such a singular way. It's when we're operating in the most dense singular way that we perceive the disconnect between particular areas of interest. And I don't necessarily see that there are disconnects between areas. I look for the connects instead. And then our life becomes richer as a consequence. And also we begin to be able to disentangle ourselves from the singular density of the false matrix.
Well, you talk about the connections and the disconnections.
Yes.
I find that, much like the story that was written that became the movies, The Matrix, most people are actually somewhat satisfied that they're in the Matrix. They like the false food. They like the false wealth. They like the false success. However, I think that's the connection with the 3D. Some people are connected to the 5D, but they're living in the 3D, and they end up in a state of either confusion or sadness that they cannot explain. They don't understand why they eat and yet they're not filled. They don't understand why they love and yet are not loved. And it's because their connection is with 5D, but they're living in 3D. And I think that's where Ascension Gateway workers like you are just trying to show them where they walk through. How do you walk out of 3D into 5D and still stay here?
It's kind of interesting. I think the clues lie in looking at the ancients. So to be able to look at certainly the architectural technologies of the ancients, they had an uncanny ability to be able to plant the clues in the gateways, in the gateways that demonstrate that we can be extraordinary human beings, but be here as well. And,
Sure.
and I believe that's something that's hugely important, because of course one of the features of the false matrix is the programming that shepherds and herds
it's very slick
into cities.
It's very slick. It's all throughout movies. It's all throughout education. It's throughout the law. You bet that script is very, very well written.
It's very tight, isn't it? So where we look at, and I think this is quite interesting, where we begin to look at the ancients, look at the ancient technologies, look at certainly some of the prophecies, because the prophecies also identify these times that we are currently in. And so it gives us certain clues in terms of utilizing the planetary grid, utilizing gateways, utilizing ancient architecture, particularly as devices to plant us into the third dimensional timeline, but also to plant us firmly in a choice of multiple timelines. So you get the awakening, you get the integration, you get the expansion.
I often say that the present is much more easily negotiated when viewed from the future.
Oh my goodness. You're referencing quite a lot of ancient Egypt, and I completely agree. The ancient practices in Egypt were committed to traveling to the very beginning of time. And then when we look at, for example, Akhenaten, then also the practices there are about transcending time. Even if we look at the gateway of Osiris, we have certain principles being put into place which actually tell us so much about how we transcend the false matrix. So there are many clues. So of course, standing in the gateway of eternity means that we must embody the principle of Mat, truth, and we must counterbalance our heart against the feather. Then we step through the third dimensional timeline, and then we stand in the gateway of eternity. And that was, of course, a practice for the ancient Egyptians in life and for regeneration.
Well, I kind of feel like, eternity already started. We're somewhere actually in the middle of eternity now. Even though we think we're in a mortal life, we're actually a spiritual being having a very short mortal life in this, what I call a biological transducer, because I approach things from a scientific point of view. So we have this great set of instruments in this body, and sometimes it hurts to interpret our world, and sometimes it feels wonderful. I for one, like food and drink and good conversation in this mortal body, but it is through this mortal body that our spirit, the part that doesn't actually have pain sensors, feels and interprets the universe. So that's how we get, I think, trapped into the 3D, is that we're in this third dimensional body made of third dimensional matter, but we're actually a multi-dimensional being.
Yes. I've just been working on a presentation for Australia, and that presentation is looking at the gateways, looking at consciousness, the expansion of consciousness, the expansion of who we are beyond the false matrix. And when we have glimpses and when we are initiated and mentored into the realities or into the gateways of consciousness that are beyond the false matrix, it's there we can have contact, communications with the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there we can integrate those facets of our eternity that we are disconnected with in this particular incarnation. And I've heavily been examining the nature of the ascension currently, and the nature not only of this particular incarnation, but the nature of the soul scars associated with multiple incarnations and constantly being hit via our incarnations on this particular planet by the frequency fences that have been put into place to pause the evolution of humanity. And one of my key roles as an ascension gatekeeper, which I am, is to aid individuals to hit the signature or the frequency signature that allows them the access into what you've just described. And we need to experience individuals who are operating, existing in a signature that is beyond third density. That part is important. And I also consider, even within our spiritual arena, there's a massive difference between information and disclosure, and then individuals embodying the ascension process. And this is one of the ways I actually detect how individuals or how experts or researchers, how they're researching their material, because of course a direct contact experience is going to massively upscale your consciousness and smash you through the fences of the false matrix. So there's a real difference between embarking on a third dimensional journey with this particular subject, which is quantum in its nature, and moving into the direct experience, which is what we actually need in order to break free of the false matrix.
So this,
and again, it's,
well, let me back up, because you create these 7,500 word sentences. Let me break it just a little bit here. And we're talking about this direct experience. I've got about two minutes in this hour, and then what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the studio, because they're going to play the news and all this stuff, and you and I will stay connected on YouTube, and then we'll bring the studio in after the news plays, and that way the news won't be recorded on this broadcast, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the direct experience, I think,
okay, so let's
define that.
Okay, so the direct experience is where you have proof, and that's where we actually completely agree, because of the way I was tutored and prepared for one of the highest academic trainings in the world. My mind is set up for very high level analysis, and so the whole drive to me working in the field of metaphysics wasn't about blind acceptance, but was to move into the direct experience. And I wanted to have proof, and I wanted to have filming proof, and I wanted to be researched scientifically too, which also raises the bar in the arena, and it also consistently opened gateways for me in which I would have direct contact experiences, logging them, often having direct contact experiences with my groups, my tours, individuals. And when we're working at that particular level, the direct experience is what upgrades our consciousness. So it empowers us, it awakens us, it heals us, it transforms us, it upgrades us. And it allows us to, without question, recalibrate the wounds that we have inherited through our exchanges, through our ancestral lineages, our contracts in life, our simple day-to-day.
So do you think we can actually rewrite that contract? Or do you think we come into this world with one contract and that's our gig, and if we stray from it, we're in violation of the contract? Do you think we can rewrite it?
I think it's interesting. I think there are certain themes that we have laid down, and we will have certain appointments with time. And our contracts are certainly timed within the context of freedom. We create more freedom the more inner work we do, the more peace we create within ourselves, which is about our accountability, constant accountability, constant analysis of self, resetting self, etc. So our destiny, wow, it's a really interesting question. We must listen to it. It's at the core of every healing agenda: pain, suffering, projection of the wound. I mean, it takes us into the individual, and it takes us into the collective, and it takes us into the very reason, or it takes us into the very reason why, for example, we allow human suffering, because of course, where we're entangled in the false matrix, our frequency becomes so dense that we have no ability to comprehend or have any empathy with suffering. And I think it's quite an interesting topic currently, because of course there's massive manipulation now happening at very subtle levels in terms of media, social media, etc.
Well, I mean, look what's happened. You know, had a global syndicate that controlled this planet for thousands of years, and they lost control of the planet when America was formed. We changed everything. They kind of left us to our own designs, but we managed to succeed anyway. And for the last 86 years, since they couldn't defeat us in war, they tried to infiltrate our government and destroy it from within, and they almost had us. So now we're to the point where we're breaking free from the inner control of the global syndicate, and
yes.
And they don't want to let us go. And so the whole world right now, especially the last, 48 hours, we've really gone through a painful process. And fortunately, we have great leaders that have cooler heads, and we're not entering into a period of vast human suffering like we have in the past. And maybe, I don't know if you feel this, but I feel like we're like on the threshold, literally, of 1,000 years of peace. If we can negotiate this, and people like you and me, and by the way, Dolores Finney is also in the chat room right now on YouTube. If we can negotiate this tricky period and keep the false matrix from rehooking us into another decade of pain and suffering, I think we can transcend it and enter a long period of peace.
And I'm heading out to Egypt tomorrow.
Oh, my.
Oh, yeah. So I'm...
Okay, I'm going to bring the studio back in. There might be still a
Yeah.
little bit of music playing, but I think we got it.
Okay.
And
So,
we should be connected. Okay, we're good. Welcome back, everyone, by the way, with freedomslips.com. We're still live. We're live for another hour with America Free Radio. My guest tonight is Tracey Ash. She's leaving tomorrow for Egypt, so this is your chance to listen up. And if you want to write comments in the chat room on YouTube Live, that's how we're communicating right now. I will relay those to her. If you have any questions, I will put her link in the description of the bottom at this this video, so you can reach her if you need to have a personal guidance, or you would like to go on one of her tours with her, either to Australia, Japan, Egypt, or actually everywhere in the world, because she's an Ascension Gateway worker. Really quick, I want to make a plug for the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition. You can see the logo there on YouTube. It's nippy.com, NPIEE.com. Two things. First, you can sign up for the newsletter very easily. It's free. And the second thing is go to the sponsorship tab and become a patron. All you have to do is click on there. There are all kinds of levels of participation, from $5 all the way to $5,000 if you want to go on the voyage with us above the Arctic Circle in 2021. Just search for the opening through the crust into the inner Earth. This is the expedition we've been working on for a long time, and this is the way that it gets done. Spread the link. Nippy.com. That's how it gets done. Okay, let's get back to our great conversation. So what are you going to be doing in Egypt? Who's lining up there? What sites are you going to go to? What is the purpose that you're going there for?
I'm going to be hosting a mystery school at the end of January, but I'm heading out because, of course, there's a lunar eclipse, and my plans were to be in Uluru for that lunar eclipse because I was speaking at a conference. And now I'm still speaking at the conference, although remotely, and I'm actually going to Egypt to anchor the gateways and really lock into place some global gateway work to stabilize the planetary grid. I do a lot of work in response to world events. So I've been spending a lot of time in response to world events.
There have been a lot of world events. No doubt about that.
Yeah. So I tend to find myself in situations where world events are escalating. I was in Egypt during the Arab Spring. I was in Japan. Yeah. So I was just in Japan during the typhoon. It's an interesting time for us to tackle the reality of the world that we exist in. Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting time for us to consider how we tackle the problems of the world in different ways. So I work a lot through the gateways because, of course, the gateways are where we have access to all of the timelines. And that allows us to, yes, recalibrate our own consciousness, but also to activate those gateways at the same time allows the collective to be upgraded without there being the tedious effort of the third dimension, the singular.
Sure.
So there are interesting technologies to ignite when we, for example, visit gateways. I mean, your trip is going to be absolutely astonishing. Oh my goodness, I would just love to come with you because, of course, the gateways mean that we can have direct contact, and direct contact means that we accelerate our own journey of healing so much because we're in the gateways, because we're in these intensified ascension upgrades and intensified dimensional communications and intensified contact experiences. So when we go to ancient sites, for me, it's so much more than simply showing up in a particular location.
Sure.
Because those locations mean we can experience so much on so many multiple dimensions. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, a lot of us have a bucket list of places around the planet that we've always wanted to see. And
Yes.
Sometimes you can't get there on your own. I highly suggest, if you do think about going to Egypt, that you don't do it on your own, that you do it with a good tour. First of all, you need the protection. Second of all, you need, if you're going to gain access to places like Abydos or Dendera, you're going to have to be with the tour group because you can't get the permit on your own to go to these places. You've got to have authorization to do that.
And yeah, the security is already ramping up. Here in London, we had one of the train stations evacuated, so I expect to go to Egypt, and there's always highest level security there anyway, but you're absolutely right. You do need permits to access particular sites, and I believe that anyone experiencing, for example, Egypt, it isn't about going on a generic tour. You need the exceptional guides in place who can take you to the sites that are the most extraordinary and the most interesting, and also to remember that the gateways change in accordance with collective changes, astrological changes as well. So I'm often, when I'm at sites, being guided as to which site is live, which site is really primed to initiate people within the context of the ascension. So I was there during the 11/11, and to be in the gateways at particular cycles, that too is quite important. So I'm often in Egypt during solstice or during equinox as well, because those gateways are synonymous with, of course, the ancient Egyptians. So there are many factors to consider when an individual is considering a tour to Egypt. And of course, it's track record. I mean, so many people seek to do tours in Egypt and they don't really have the experience of Egypt. I've been researching Egypt now, traveling there, partially living there almost 10 years. We do about 9 tours a year.
Wow.
I think I've visited Egypt about 70 times. We're planning on building a retreat center there this year. We have the land. It's at the very heart of ascension because, of course, the false matrix took so much of the ancient Egyptian and manipulated it. And so when we visit Egypt, it allows us to both address sacred ancient knowledge, and at the same time, it allows us to address the false matrix. And I find it fascinating because in Egypt, we can have both, because of course, ancient Egypt, as soon as you bring in the Greeks and the Romans, you have the manipulation of
exactly.
the purer ancient knowledge, and you can feel the frequency downgrades.
And you can see it too. If you go to Dendera, you can see the old higher frequency, Hathors and all the beautiful architecture. And then you can see like almost a line down the middle of the structure where the Roman begins. It is not even the same quality of architecture. It's really low frequency.
It's extremely poor architecture. And of course, it's immensely ugly, and it pays no respect to the ancient architectural sciences. So I find it interesting. What's quite interesting about Dendera is that it's built on a very ancient site, which corresponds with the Great Pyramid. So
yes,
the location, the location is perfect. So it holds still intact a gateway. I mean, I've done some extraordinary work on the ascension at Dendera, particularly around the Dendera zodiac as the prophetic technology for our times. And I've done so much research and solid ascension preparation work in those gateways. So absolutely, I completely agree with you. The downgrading of ancient Egypt through the Greeks and through the Romans is quite astonishing. And even just to experience that as a traveler, and it, of course, it complicates our understanding of Egypt.
Yeah.
However,
if you go there, a lot of people don't know this because sometimes you don't get on the right tour and you don't get access. But if you go to Dendera, it's a beautiful building, and the if they've cleaned up all the smoke out of it, you can see all the artwork, newt on the roof, and just all this gorgeous stuff in these high ceilings. But like Tracey was saying, it's built on top of an ancient site that corresponds with the original 3 pyramids in Giza. And if you gain access to that, you have to go down through a little hole in the ground and climb down a ladder. Maybe you have seen these pictures of these giant like bulbs with electrical wires, and they used to call it the Egypt lights or whatever, and the batteries all connected, to blue and red batteries connected. But it's a very narrow room, and it's underground. It's under the floor. of what is Dendera. And you can see this very ancient site. And of course, if you go, make sure to take a wide angle lens, because this is barely a hallway. So you can't stand back from it and actually get a picture of it with a regular camera. You have to have a wide angle lens to see it. And if you don't go prepared, well, then you've missed it. So that's why it's important to take a tour and make sure to gain access to these special places, because then you can see the higher frequency that existed way before Egypt was ever Egypt.
Yes, and have you seen those scenes in the crypt? There are very close to those reliefs. Those reliefs are also repeated in the Temple of Isis around the back of the Temple of Hathor as well.
Tracy, I have a question. I have a question because another Tracy in the chat room has asked the question.
Yeah.
If you have any insight on where Rh negative blood came from, if it's Egypt related.
Oh, interesting. It's quite a hot topic at the moment in terms of, okay, I work with direct experience, and okay, I was a gatekeeper in the Great Pyramid, and the Great Pyramid was utilized as a technology for the sacred seeding of humanity. And that sacred seeding has very strong connections and very evident connections with Sirius. So I would trace extraterrestrial lineages where there is a very strong ancient Egyptian connection to Sirius. That would also indicate as well there are multiple souls being born at these times who have extraordinary gifts in multiple fields of endeavor. So, for example, you have the ability to transcend multiple platforms and do that in an extremely grounded third dimensional way, although you have that ability to really encompass multiple gateways of knowledge. And I also believe that question also relates to the millennials, the star seeds, etc., that have been born in mass, and those individuals who've been sacred seeded as the evolutionary keys for humanity. There is a certain percentage of our population, global population, who is capable of initiating the ascension and capable of initiating the ascension in very small numbers. Agree?
Yeah, I agree. In each generation, a small number of mortals actually have this ability. It's interesting that you keyed in on Sirius, because the last lifetime that I have any knowledge of before this one is on a planet that revolved around a red giant. Actually, it was a sun that was going red giant in the Cygnus star system, which is in the direction of Sirius. Right. I'm not Syrian, but I don't really actually know what world I come from, because I was conscribed to go to that world, died on that world, but I was not a native to that world. So once that planet was dissolved in the red giant sun, then I was disembodied. And that happened 1,800 years ago. So then I came here. I've tried a lot of times, but I don't really have any knowledge of any mortal life between then and here. That feels so fresh to me. And when I go into meditation, that's the first place that I go. That's my launch place when I connect. So when I went to Egypt and realized that those original 3 pyramids of Giza were aligned with the star Sirius to within 1/2 arc second, and the idea, well, the fact that these 3 buildings have been aligned with Sirius for well over 11,000 years, considering that we've passed through 3 precessional steps of the zodiac since then, we should not still be aligned with Sirius unless Sirius was a binary star with our sun. And that makes it most interesting to me.
Yes. And I love that you're upholding the critical importance of Sirius, because of course in the ancient Egyptian mythologies and knowledge, Isis and Horus are also key in terms of Sirius too. And where we have that lineage in place, then we also have the capability to also understand the void, the 0 point, the sacred feminine as the pathway. Now that is Luxor. So you have Temple of Mut, which had 720 Sekhmets. The Sekhmets are the lion-headed goddesses, the lion-headed beings of Sirius. And that gives us definitively our earth connection. I've also worked a lot in Karnak and the Temple of Mut, and 720 Sekhmets. For me, it means one thing. 720, it's the sacred masculine and it's the sacred feminine. And it's the void. And then it's also that absolute divine masculine. And what is also interesting about this is just come as we're discussing, is the binary aspect, and the binary aspect that also comes through with, for example, Akhenaten, because you have that switch of the male female. So the embodiment of the divine feminine through the masculine form, etc. And ancient Egypt is just genius in terms of paradox. Yes?
Yes.
And paradox is what allows us to time travel and allows us to propel ourselves into the future. And that's what I also believe the Great Pyramids were also designed for. So the seeding of humanity, yes, to travel
I'm thinking
the dimensions. Yeah.
Traveling in time is sometimes confused with seeing through time. Even though the physical body, all the peas and carrots and pizza that make up this body here, physically, it's difficult for this body to go through time. But the human spirit, the human consciousness, as far as I know, is the only being on this planet that can perceive time. And in the perception of time, we can observe the past and we can observe the future. And by doing so, we can actually change it. We can change it on an individual basis, but if a whole bunch of us get together and observe it at the same time, we can change the average reality. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. And this is what the ancients left in the instructions written into the Dendera zodiac. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So the more we are educated to be able to transform our stories, so understand the importance of our stories. And yet, again, this comes back to paradox. Egypt has taught me so much in terms of paradox and embracing, embodying that possibility, which allows us to surrender the constrictions of the false matrix. And the ancient Egyptians were genius in terms of existing in this world, in this time framework, and yet being able to switch out of it through their advanced consciousness training, of course. And it's through advanced consciousness training or through intense contracts that we experience through our lives, because however much we're attached to the false matrix, everyone experiences profound contracts, life experiences that shake the false matrix to the very, very core. And so we are constantly initiated, whether we buy into spirituality or not. And it's that legacy that the ancient Egyptians left in the Temple of Hathor, that humanity indeed did choose to go the wrong way, and that these end times are the times where we must correct our history in order to go forward. So it's interesting you brought that subject up, because we do need to transform our history. And once we do that, we can change our current story, and we can open the gates of the future and contact and an intelligence that takes us beyond where we are now.
Well, see, I think this is where the envy of the angels lies. Because we were created a little lower than the angels, but our potential is so much higher than the angels. And so when the fallen angels came here to this world, one of the things that they did is they locked us into a matrix that convinces us in the third dimension that we cannot see through time, that we cannot change time, that we are locked into an Armageddon matrix and we can't escape from it. But I think the founding fathers of America decided to choose another future. They saw through it, and they created a possibility for humans to choose their own future. And since 1787, by the way, I was just at Washington's crossing of the Delaware on Sunday, and it was quite fascinating to see the Durham boats parked there in a building right there on the edge of the Delaware, where they reenact this every year. And I saw the significance of the Durham boats being responsible for Washington to be able to win the war to establish America. And that the attorney that's in charge of fighting this second war for America is named Durham. I just thought that was magnificently apropos.
Whoa.
Yeah, very, very powerful stuff. So here we are. We are able to perceive time. We're able to comprehend it. We're able to observe it outside of the present. As I said, the present is more easily negotiated when viewed from the future. And this is our unique ability as the beings that we are in this universe to transcend and break out of the matrix that has been established by dark angels since man was very young on this planet. And I think, you could correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm misguided, but I think that's the war we're fighting right now, is the light of humanity and the beings that we are and the darkness of the dark angels that have been trapped on this world for hundreds of thousands of years.
It's absolutely fascinating. I absolutely agree. There is a battle of light and dark. We are going to win. That is for sure.
Where do you think we came from?
To that question about the sacred seeding of humanity, and I believe within our species there are multiple species, all with particular origins, and that creates a certain propensity. I have been experiencing, certainly when we were in Shasta, there was a profound cosmic battle taking place.
Sure.
And it's incredibly evident currently that there are those who are enslaved and who will be enslaved because of the choices that they're making, but also because of evolutionary status.
Okay. So you bring up a really good point, because even though this is 2020, it doesn't mean that every soul that's alive in a physical body on this earth is the same age.
Yes. Because we are prone to, of course, ego and, of course, an elitism within the context of this. And this is one of my very arguments about the way currently that so many people are self-educating or initiating themselves on the internet or proclaiming themselves as experts. And of course, that is not correct. So we must be extremely careful and extremely humble currently. And we must look at the complexity of our existence, which means there is so much more to unravel beyond the false matrix. So I've done a massive amount of work in terms of tracing my own lineage, being very clear about my own destiny, my own contracts, etc. What we have on the planet, I think we should be educated in our free will. It's so easy to be detoured. It's so easy to be persuaded. It's so easy to persuade ourselves.
Sure.
And again, the ancient Egyptians created certain technologies and also the architecture created certain structures and conditions. Those structures, conditions, realities created the frequency switch so that the ego can be managed. And if you, for example, translate Pernita is the house of God, then we have that intelligence to step into when we step into, for example, a pyramid. And it's finding the tipping points, the technologies that can assist us in ensuring we utilize our free will better, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for most of our existence here on this planet, we have free will. Now, some of us are born into slavery, and some of us are born with, severe handicaps, and maybe we don't have the ability to choose, but most of us do. And what blows my mind, Tracey, is everywhere I travel, I see people who freely abdicate their own free will to someone else. They give up their ability to choose to someone else. And you see it everywhere. You see people lost and angry and frustrated and violent because they have, and we see it in our own political parties in this country. Pretty much close to half this country has abdicated their own free will and choice to a political party that promises to take care of them until they die. And they're lying. And that's why we're trying to wake people up.
It certainly is. I believe there's a grassroots movement, and it's initiated by individuals like you and I. And for me, it's about operating very humbly, educating individuals, training individuals who seek my training methods. And that creates small but significant changes in the world where that individual can then impact their family or their community. And that's what Ascension is. It's a very gentle movement. And I believe a whole spiritual arena as well, that equally at the same time requires a great deal of intelligence, because we need to create a community that is better educated, better prepared, and much more responsible in terms of one's belief systems and one's actions. And I believe that's true of so many different dimensions of life, that individual currently does need to take responsibility. And we are entering a phase of looking inwards because, of course, the external is not serving the health of society.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, we have, I think, two great forces that have always been available on the planet. One has, well, it's often said you can't be a judge of one another. We're not supposed to do that. And we know what happens when we do that. We get darkened with the judgment by which we're judging someone else. However,
yes,
it does say in all the ancient writings that we are allowed to be fruit inspectors, so to speak. ye shall know them by their fruits. And the methods are also described, because the methods of this ruling force that's on the earth consist of violence, of indoctrination, of strong condemning rhetoric, and the fruits or the methods of the forces of light are long-suffering and mercy and charity and empathy and care and assistance. And so we can see this very clearly in our society. We can see it in our various world governments. We can see it in our education system. We can see it in our entertainment systems. And I think that part of the job of being a caretaker of the earth, of being, let's call it a light worker, is to perhaps journey close to the dark places and show the light, so that those that can see it, that can resonate with that little spark, will come out. You know, Jesus once said that he was a shepherd, and one of the things the ancients used to do when they would go to town with all the sheep is they would drive them all into a canyon, and then one or two shepherds would watch the mouth of the canyon to protect the sheep, keep wolves from getting in there, while the rest of the shepherds went to town and did trading and shopping and took care of things. And then when the shepherd would come back, here's this huge flock of sheep. Their voice would only call their sheep out. And then Jesus used to say, you know, my sheep hear my voice and they will come out. So we, as these light workers, as these, let's call them Ascension Gateway caretakers, we can use our voice, we can use our light, and those who will resonate with it, who will hear it, they'll come out of the darkness.
I agree. As I move into my fifth decade, I stay, and I have done, stay very clear to my mission, and those who resonate or can listen to my message, those are the individuals I don't need to persuade, we just fit. And that's an incredibly important part of the Ascension, and then mobilizing an Ascension community also, because of course those who are perhaps not ready, we can aid them by revealing our light and give them a choice to step forward. But perhaps not everyone is ready for that commitment.
Yeah, well, you don't have a lot of time. I mean, it's not like you can sit around and play your dark games for years and years and years. This is the time. 2020 is the year of action, people.
I absolutely agree. And we are in a battle of light and dark. And if those of your listeners who are awake, light workers, conscious, you will be aware that there are contracts in place that can detour you currently, but where we step into battle to overcome the darkness, our light comes stronger and our mission clearer. That also allows us to mobilize with individuals who are fit to serve our purpose and us theirs. So we enter a very different paradigm of mobilization.
Sure.
Which is also incredibly interesting. That happens so much in Shasta because, of course, the panels were extraordinary. Your input was astounding. And because there were so many genuine light workers present, all with very different journeys, missions, it created an incredible symphony of ideas and perspectives and integrity.
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, for those of you that weren't there, this was Avatars of the Earth. Now, an avatar in the ancient writings, an avatar is a manifestation, like an avatar of Vishnu. And in this respect, we are the avatars of our own spirit. So this thing, this avatar that walks around the planet and experiences it, this biological transducer, we are the avatar. We're the avatar of our own spirit. And so it's up to us to choose what to do, what special capabilities we're going to give that avatar while we're here on this earth. And that's what I found so fascinating.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary event. And it was an extraordinary event for contact. There was immense evidence of contact. There were profound and visible indications of a battle of light and dark. It was both human and then dimensional as well. I mean, it was everything's happening under the umbrella of Avatars of the Earth gathering.
That's true. So we have about 12, 15 minutes left. And
awesome.
So what I want to do is talk about what is your plan for 2020? I know you're going to go to Egypt and Australia and Japan, but I mean, what do you want humanity to accomplish in 2020?
I'm moving with my work closer and closer to the many individuals who are working genuinely. And I believe that is the case for all individuals who are pure in their intention. So I'm seeing 2020 more of that community mobilizing and coming together, transcending limitations and walls, and more creative genius, more creative intelligence visible in terms of healing the wounds of humanity and healing the wounds of the earth. I've got some prophecies. I have a lot of downloads that become stories, and those stories step out of time, and they're usually in the future. So we have many initiations to face in terms of our planet. So where we go in terms of the collective consciousness, our sacred earth is going to truly mirror that.
I believe that too. Do you get the feeling that the planet itself, is not only alive, but is getting ready to go through a metamorphosis? And that's why it's so important for us to travel to the places of the planet where we are naturally drawn to, so we can add our consciousness to that grid.
Yeah, and also the gateways have been deactivated in terms of the manipulation of the false matrix. So getting to sites is hugely important, and it doesn't need to be, of course, bucket list sites, but to hook into the planetary grid wherever you are and make that a point within the context of your own inner reflection work, even if you're not massively involved in meditation or spiritual work, that these gateways, these energy pathways afford you the inner time and space, which allows you to recalibrate and allows you to recalibrate with this reality, these timelines, etc. And it allows you a little more choice than you would have in the density of the false matrix, which is a war zone in itself.
Sure it is. Yeah.
Your expedition would just be extraordinary to be in virgin gateways.
Oh, it's virgin, that's for sure. No one's ever
Yeah.
sailed these waters before. They've been covered with ice, and when they're not covered with ice, they're surrounded by icebergs. So there are only 3 ships in the world that can travel these waters, and we're going to take one of them.
And that's what you're saying, the entity that is our planet goes live when we enter these virgin gateways. And there is data to be downloaded. There are truths and stories to be downloaded. And that can correct our history, both personal and collective. And that I also find extraordinary.
Yeah.
And that's a really important aspect of opening your own internal time and space, because of course the false matrix doesn't grant you any kind of access to the earth as that intelligent entity. And I believe that's how, say, for example, the Great Pyramids interface with the planetary grid, where all of the histories of the planet are recorded within the Great Pyramid. And that's why it is not decorated, because it is meant to be utilized as a downloading device.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, because if I go to the Great Pyramid, I spend like 8 or 9 hours there. I am constantly looking at how my consciousness interfaces with the architecture. So I never see it as a singular. I'm always looking at what's happening in my consciousness as I'm interfacing with this particular technology.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we have about a minute and a half left, Tracey, and I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. I know it's very late in the UK. You're going to travel tomorrow, so I really, really appreciate you giving of your time and being here with us at America Free Radio.
Oh, thank you so much. You and we've got to do an extraordinary event. We have to. We will do. I know. I'm
in. Schedule it. We'll promote it on here. We'll fill the place up.
Yeah, that would be extraordinary. Let's do it.
All right. Take care of yourself, and we will talk to you another time. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Lots of love. God bless.
All right, Earth Explorers, this is X Squared Radio on the America Free Radio Network. My name is Brooks Agnew. The music is going to play here just any second. I want you to go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. That's what it's all about. 2020 is the year of action. I will not be live Sunday night. I'll be traveling back from Boulder, Colorado after being on Beyond Belief TV with George Noory. Thank you so much for being part of the program. Good night, everyone.